Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we are welcoming Ken Munro, the guy who knows how to hack everything. Hopefully he won't hack my house, but God willingly, we shall go through this episode with no failures to our systems. Yeah. So welcome, Ken, to the show.
Hey, nice to meet you. Yeah, it's I know. I do enjoy finding security bugs and things, particularly stuff that you can relate to people, relates to the consumer. So when it's something that's in your home, something that invade your privacy, that's when I get really concerned.
So take us through your early life. Who was Ken?
Oh my God, where did I start off as? Well, I'm a failed physicist.
Wow.
And I've spent a few years working in hotels and catering, and it was there that I started finding security flaws in point-of-sale systems.
Yeah.
And I remember I'd crashed out our billing system to DOS and was happily having one of the restaurant check printers print my mortgage amortization statement. And I think that's when my boss came in and said, I think your career lies elsewhere, Ken, which is a nice way of firing me. So I ended up working in antivirus for a firm called Dr. Solomon's, who were like the best UK firm for doing antivirus. They sold to McAfee, who are still around. And that kind of started my career in cyber. I've been working in pen testing ever since.
Okay. So initially, one of the things which you got known about was the world famous My Friend Cayla, that robot which is just next to you here. Yeah.
She is. Yeah, she
So
is.
which ended up being banned in Germany as an illegal espionage device. What was that moment you realized that an innocent toy was actually a spy in the living room?
It was fun actually. A couple of colleagues helped me out. So my colleague Tom noticed her in a store and said, "Look, I've just seen this creepy dolly." And so we got one. And then my colleague Dave Lodge and I started looking at her and realized there was a complete lack of pairing security on the Bluetooth connection. So the microphone in here and the speaker, anyone could connect to it, which is crazy. You could genuinely connect this doll to your cell phone and you could actually use her as a Bluetooth headset. So you could make phone calls on the dolly if you want. Got some weird looks. Anyway. The problem being, though, is that you could connect to the dolly's microphone from about 60 feet, maybe 20 meters away. And if this was in the child's bedroom, someone nearby, so street outside, next door neighbor or next door apartment, could listen to the microphone and bug your kids, which is really bad. And we're ethical, we're responsible. So we told the manufacturer and said, hey, there's a problem with your dolly. And they dismissed it as a prank. And said, oh, hang on a minute, you're continuing to sell products that can be used to bug kids. So we took her to the BBC. We took her to the technology correspondent at the BBC and said, we've got this dolly that spies on kids. We're like, oh, brilliant. So the next day we were on live TV in the UK talking about this dolly. And that was great. And finally she got banned. So we were working with some consumer organizations, and a German privacy lawyer called Stefan Hessel was just finishing his law degree, I think, and he realized that this little dolly violated a German privacy law. So BNetzA, the German telecommunications regulator, issued banning guidance the next day because she breached the law. And then she was banned across Germany. You now get a €25,000 fine for owning her, which is great. And various European countries have banned her since. You can't buy her anymore, so she's actually quite rare now. I've got 5 of them still, but you can't get hold of them. But it's just a great example of you make a mistake when you're producing smart devices, and if you can't update the software in the field, you're stuck. You've either got to do a product recall, which is hugely expensive,
Very expensive.
Face fines, which is a real shame. And the bit I'm most proud of, well, in fact, there's 2 things I'm most proud of. First thing is we looked at her and realized actually there's some fun. So if the child ever swears at the dolly, it tells the child to go and speak to their parents. Nice idea. How does the dolly know what a swear word is? And so we unpacked the mobile application that she interacts with. We found a database table, a SQLite database called ZBadWord, and in there is 1,536 swear words. Some of them are quite spicy. So we deleted those, recompiled the app, re-signed it, loaded it back to the mobile application, and now she swears like a docker all over again. So she's fun. But the last piece of fun with this dolly is that she actually started laws changing. And in the United States, the California Senate introduced Senate Bill 327, and the senator who introduced the bill quoted the work of my friend Cayla as the reason why they wanted to ban vulnerable and hackable smart devices. So she changed the world.
Yeah, in her good-looking dress, I guess.
She just
So on to the next thing you actually had, which was the Wi-Fi kettle. It sounds funny, but the fact that there are a lot of IoT devices nowadays, such things are very common. So how did that actually come about?
Yeah, that was another random one. So I think one of my colleagues was on eBay, and I've actually got it here. This is the original Wi-Fi kettle from a company called Smarter. And same thing, yeah, nice idea. They rushed to market really quickly. They wanted to, like many smart device vendors, they want to get first mover advantage. They want to get to market as quickly as they can. And one of the challenges we saw is many of the companies that were developing smart devices came from a background of developing mobile apps, which is kind of the big cash cow of the 2010s, I suppose. And the great thing about a mobile app is if you make a mistake, you can just publish an update and it's released and everyone gets the update.
Yeah.
No, problem is this is hardware, and the hardware that does the smarts is actually sat, excuse me a minute, I grabbed the base, is sat inside here in the base. And inside there is a Wi-Fi module that you can connect to with your smartphone and turn the kettle on and boil your hot water. Nice idea. Unfortunately, there was a major flaw. So once we'd decompiled the mobile application, we found that the pin for the wireless access point was 6 zeros, and you couldn't actually change it in the Android version. And that meant that you could walk past someone's kitchen with a Wi-Fi antenna, maybe a flipper nowadays. You could de-auth the kettle, and you could then connect to it, put in 6 zeros, and then recover your Wi-Fi key. So the kettle disclosed access to your home network. And back in the day, a decade ago, actually having someone's Wi-Fi network key was quite serious because a lot of protocols on your home network run encrypted. And that's largely changed nowadays. So we've got headers such as HSTS, which enforces HTTPS connections. So actually most wireless traffic on your home network is encrypted now, which is good. But certainly back in the day, the early Wi-Fi kettle, it was all pretty bad. Yeah, so it went on actually. I've got more Wi-Fi kettles up here, and I've got a Wi-Fi coffee machine just here, but you don't want to see that. But it's, again, we disclosed, we told the manufacturer, and they were like, just didn't do much. So then they released the version 2 of the kettle, which was a bit better. And then finally they released version 3, which was much more secure. So if boiling water remotely is your thing, go for the kettle 3.
Which will save you at least 60 seconds of your life.
Absolutely.
So you founded the Pentest Partners with a focus of consumer security. Do you think the average person cares about security, or do they just want their gadgets to work? And how do you make them care?
So that's a really interesting point, actually. And the UK government, when we and others were making a lot of noise about smart device security, they were actually willing to regulate, to legislate. And as part of the consultation process, they actually went out to consumers and asked them, what's stopping them buying smart devices? And believe it or not, there were 2 primary responses. First one was that people couldn't see the benefit. They didn't understand, they couldn't see cost benefit of spending, £100 on a kettle versus being able to boil water from your bedroom. But the second most common objection is people weren't happy about the cybersecurity of these smart devices. So actually, I think people were aware of these problems, and a lot of the work that we and others did to highlight security problems with smart devices actually made people cautious. So I would argue, and I'd say to anyone who builds smart devices right now, I think by addressing security concerns, you can sell more products. So cybersecurity is a revenue generator, in my view anyway. So yes, we found lots of problems. We found consumers objected to them. But I think the biggest challenge for most consumers is, unlike your home appliances, so buying a refrigerator or a washing machine, there's often, certainly in Europe, there's a sticker on it that tells you how efficient it is. And that allows the consumer to say, well, I'm going to pay a bit more money to get one that uses less energy, less power, right? But that's great. So the consumer is informed. But you can't do that on a smart device. How do you inform a consumer about smart device security on a sticker? That's very difficult to do. So there is some work going on in the USA. So NIST is working on a smart labeling scheme. And I believe the EU is looking at it too. But I actually think the best way to do that is actually put some barriers to entry into the market. And that's what's happened partly in the UK and partly in the EU with the coming CRA Act. And it's actually saying that manufacturers aren't allowed to sell product in these markets unless they meet a certain level of cybersecurity. And I'm quite a fan of that. And the reason I'm a fan is it means that manufacturers who take security seriously and invest in it aren't undercut by manufacturers who don't, because they've got a cheaper price point. So actually, I think it's a really good thing for our consumers that manufacturers are forced to show they do security well.
Yeah, but don't you feel like that will also be limiting for startups?
Well, I don't think security costs significantly more if you think about security on day one. The biggest problem we find is manufacturers build a product and then come to us just before they launch and go, hey, can you check it's secure? Can you do a penetration test or a hardware review? And we're like, oh, you've got some major problems. You've got the wrong chipset. For example, we've got some chips here. You've chosen the wrong chip. And now you're in a real fix because you need to change your entire manufacturing process. Whereas some organizations come to us on day one and say, we're going to build a smart kettle. How do we do it securely? And we'll give them a bunch of advice. We'll advise them which chipset to choose, which source of cryptography to go down, maybe to work with an IoT platform to get to market faster. And you know that you get to market really quickly, faster than if you did it yourself, and you don't have security problems. So if you think about security early, you're not going to have expensive cybersecurity problems to fix later.
That's an interesting way of putting it. So you didn't actually stop at toys. You actually went into other things. So you found a way actually how to disable the alarm of a Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV using just a smartphone. When you were hacking a 2-ton vehicle, does the adrenaline hit differently than when you were hacking a website?
So that was one of the very first vehicles we started looking at. The first two was the BMW i3 and the BMW i8, which are quite cool cars. But the first car we did true whole car testing of was a Mitsubishi Outlander. And the reason we looked at it is a friend of mine had one. And I saw this weird wireless access point. I thought, what's that? He said, oh, don't know, come and have a look. And we started looking at it and realized if we went any further, we'd probably damage his car. So we bought our own car. So we owned a Mitsubishi Outlander hybrid. And so, again, one of my colleagues, Dave, and I spent some time reverse engineering the protocol, decompiling the mobile app, working how it was sending commands to the car, and realized that you could easily intercept those commands, replay them. So you could do things like unlock the car, you could turn off the car alarm, and there are various other things you could do. And again, it's all because the manufacturer had tried to do connectivity from the mobile app on the cheap. And it was that cheap way of doing it exposed them to being hacked.
So it was purely a man-in-the-middle attack where just because of poor encryption standards, you ended up hacking them.
Yeah. They'd chosen to do it over Wi-Fi. They'd chosen very weak pre-shared keys. That was very easy to crack, and you could very easily intercept and replay the traffic.
So you have done actually extensive research on electronic flight bugs, the ones that pilots use. There's a lot of fear-mongering about hacking planes from passenger seats. Can you set the record straight? Is it actually possible to interfere with an aircraft system from the cabin, or is it just a Hollywood fiction kind of situation?
Hollywood fiction. And I'll tell you why. So unsurprisingly, aircraft manufacturers have really good domain segregation on board. So in the cabin, that's a domain called the Passenger Information and Entertainment Services domain, the PIESD. And that's considered a dirty network, right? We don't care, right? It's going to have your Wi-Fi on it, you're connecting to the internet. We don't care. It's like there is no connectivity between that and the more sensitive domains. So for example, the one up front, which the pilots use, is called the ACD, the aircraft control domain. And there isn't any connectivity between that. There used to be a one-way data feed from the flight management system, but that was on a one-way data diode, and that just told your moving map and your seat where you were. So you cannot physically hack a plane from the seat up into the cockpit. It doesn't work like that. There are very careful segregation. And even if you could, first of all, the cabling is down underneath. It's hidden. You're not going to get to it. And there are 3 redundant systems, so you'd have to hack all 3 concurrently. So no, it just doesn't work. So it's Hollywood fiction.
That's interesting. But you've created demonstrations on actually hacking of planes. How far has it gone?
Well, yeah. So you can't hack planes except when you can. But of course, to do that, you need privileged access. So, for example, you're going to need access to the avionics bay, the EE bay. And to do that, you're going to need to have very privileged access from on the apron, out on the ramp, to get into the avionics bay, or you need to get into the avionics bay from the cockpit itself. So it's very high privileged access. So once you can do that, then you've got access to lots of things. But that's where physical security comes in. And guess what? Physical security is really quite good on planes and in airports. So you can't just do that. That said, once you've got access to the cockpit, then we've had control of electronic flight bags. So those are the tablet devices that give pilots directions. This is really good news. We have done some work on electronic flight bags, which the pilots take away with them. So often they'll have their roster on them, so their schedule, and you'll often find those they're using them in a hotel. And in a couple of cases, we found bugs where the electronic flight bags didn't have appropriate Wi-Fi security, so you could actually man in the middle of the traffic. Now, man in the middle over Wi-Fi doesn't really work anymore, but a misconfiguration by the provider of the flight bag meant that you could. And so you could actually tamper with the updates as they were downloaded to the flight bag, and you could do things like messing around with the charts, so that's the maps that we use. You could mess around with the approach plates, so that's how we approach the instrument landing system, for example. And you could also do things like mess around with the performance calculators. Those are the systems that tell us how much power to use on takeoff. So there were vulnerabilities. We reported them responsibly, and manufacturers listened. In fact, Boeing even invited us to their plant in Everett and gave us a tour. They were so pleased with what we found. And as a result of that, those bugs have been fixed. So don't get me wrong, aviation cyber is really, really important, but it's not as if you can simply hack a plane.
Okay, so on to ships. We rarely think about ships, but you've shown that the maritime security is a disaster zone. Satellite systems using default passwords like 1234. If a hacker compromises a cargo ship navigation, what's the most worst case scenario are we talking about when it comes to lost cargo or physical collisions?
So that's a really interesting question. So I've actually got a satellite system from a ship just here. That's a Cobham Sailor device. And a lot of satellite communications were fitted to ships without much thought about the security of the ship itself. In the past, SATCOMs were so expensive that you didn't use them. Yeah, you're talking about dollars per kilobyte, right? Incredibly expensive. But with the advent of VSAT and now Starlink, now crews and ship operators expect their ships to be connected all the time. So you can do cool things like manage the shipping routing to use as little fuel as possible. You can dynamically reroute the ship. But most importantly, the crew get internet access. And if you want good crews, they expect good internet access, right? If you don't give good internet, you're going to get really lousy crews. So we've rushed to connect ships. And most ships have decades of technical debt. That means in the past, no one cared about their security because you couldn't get to them, you couldn't connect to them. But now we've gone unconnected, unsecure ship to hyper-connected, unsecure ship. And we've done a lot of work with various ship operators showing how you can exploit the very complex and interconnected nature of those vessels. And we've, for example, successfully remotely had control of the ship's main engine and the ship's rudders. So we could have caused the ship to change course, to stop in the water, to drift. So really bad things. And to answer your question, what's the worst thing that you could do? Well, we've had remote control of ship's ballasting pumps, so you could cause the ship to heel. Now, don't get me wrong, they're quite slow to operate. It takes a long time for a ship to go over, at which point the crew is probably going to reverse that and bring it back to stability. But perhaps the worst thing you could do would be to cause a ship's rudder to go hard over in the Suez Canal, for example. We've seen that. It wasn't a hack. It was poor piloting. But actually, you could have consciously blocked the Suez Canal. And as we saw through the Evergreen Given incident, where the canal was blocked, we saw commodity prices start to rise because ships were stuck and they couldn't get to their destination. So commodity prices spiked, which actually is going to slow down the world economy a bit. So there's some really bad things that could happen.
Wow. So you've tested everything from smart locks to internet-connected sex toys. What's the most ridiculous security feature you've ever seen that was purely for show and offered zero actual protection?
Oh my gosh, there's so many candidates, but I think the most ridiculous one we ever saw was a smart lock. It was actually a smart padlock. I don't think it's here at the moment. It's away at my desk, but it was a fingerprint padlock. Now, I love the idea of fingerprint padlocks because I often forget my keys, but I don't forget my fingers, right? So this is good. I can unlock my lock easily. And it was called the tap lock. So you could either put your finger on it, or you could also tap your smartphone on it, and it would unlock using Bluetooth. And a couple of my colleagues looked at it and wanted to understand how it was using Bluetooth to unlock. So there has to be a key of some description, an electronic key. And they were having a look at it and realized that the key from the lock that was being broadcast was the Bluetooth MAC address chopped in half and reversed. And of course, this is Bluetooth. This is the one signal you're broadcasting all the time is over Bluetooth. So that it's effectively like putting the keys to your front door in the front door lock. All they'd done was just turned it around. So it took us less than a second to come up and just open any one of these padlocks. And on top of that, they had API problems which disclosed the precise GPS location. So you could go and find all of these locks to unlock using this crazy key. So that's by far the maddest.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Ken, you know where all the bodies are buried. In your own home, what smart devices do you absolutely refuse to install? Is there a line you want to cross?
So I am very, very careful with things with cameras and microphones. So yes, I have a smart heating system. Unsurprisingly, I want to be as efficient as I can and use heating and cooling when I only absolutely need it. But I have a real issue with certain devices with cameras and microphones because it's one thing losing a bit of personal data. It's another thing altogether having footage of you listening to your conversations. That's true privacy invasion. And it bothers me. Certainly a number of CCTV manufacturers, certainly at the cheaper end of the market, play very fast and loose with our security. And I've seen numerous cases of bugs we found and bugs others have found that expose very sensitive footage of individuals and also listen to their conversations. And that's really, really creepy. I remember one manufacturer that produced smartwatches for children so that you always knew where they were. But the technology they used was so poorly secured, you could actually call the kid on the smartwatch and enable the microphone and just creep up people's kids. And that's horrible, really horrible.
That's really terrible. If you are to grab every IoT manufacturer by the shoulders and scream one piece of advice at them before they release the next product, what would it be?
So it might sound counterintuitive, but if you prove your product is secure, I believe people will buy more of it. If you truly go out on a message that says this product does security well, and this is why and how we do security well, and here's validation of the fact our security is good, I genuinely believe you remove a barrier to entry. You remove a hurdle for customers to buy your product. So I truly believe that demonstrating good cybersecurity can actually increase your product sales. So take it seriously. Do cyber on day one. Don't leave it as an afterthought, because if you do, researchers like us are probably going to find your product, and we're probably going to find vulnerabilities, and you're probably going to struggle to fix them, and you're probably going to have an embarrassing situation in the media.
I think you missed one, and probably you'd get more money.
Yeah.
So thank you, Ken, for coming on the show. We definitely picked a lot in terms of IoT, planes, and manufacturing. What is your parting shots, and where can people find you?
Sure. So number one, never advertise your product as unhackable. That is like the red rag to the bull, right? You are asking for attention. Your product will be hacked, whether it's us or somebody else. If you advertise your product as unhackable, I'm ready. Don't do that. Do invest in cybersecurity. Don't leave it too late. As consumers, look for evidence that your products are secure. You could go and just search online. You could do a search product name, hacked, vulnerability, security. See if the manufacturer has had security flaws. See if they fixed them, because that's a good sign. But what I would say to absolutely everybody out there is be inquisitive. Ask questions. If you're an ethical hacker already, get your soldering iron out and start inspecting for devices, seeing if you can find vulnerabilities, and then disclosing them responsibly to manufacturers, and hopefully the world of cybersecurity and smart devices will improve.
Yes. Secondly is, where can people find you?
For sure. So the website is pentestpartners.com. We're the largest independent pen test firm in the UK, but we have operations in the US, we have operations in the EU, and we absolutely love hacking smart devices.
Definitely. I've seen the videos on YouTube, and you people are doing a very good job at that. Okay, thank you, Ken, for coming on the show, and see you all in the next episode.